The Photowalk is a Loading Zone production.
I got very excited this morning. I looked out the window, first thing I saw, mist, and more mist. I thought, let's grab that while we can. Then those that are familiar with the Extra Miler show will probably appreciate the fact that it was a tad harder to get out this morning because we have our eldest at the moment is struggling a bit getting ready for school because he broke his radius last week, and I told the story on the Extra Miler show. And so, getting out and doing basic things at the moment in a timely fashion is tricky. It was his first day back at school since an operation he had at the start of the week. I tell you what, they're pretty quick to get him back to school. And so I watched the mist gradually disappear as I took our Jack into school, thinking, I want to do the photo walk. But there's some last remnants here that I shall grab for you. Let's get a starting picture for the photo walk. Where are we? 3.2, f3.2, shutter speed 210, 160 ISO into the sun that's veiled by this scrim, this deep scrim. Actually, there's a bit more mist here. Here we go. We're above the lakes. That's why. Here we go. First picture of the day.
The foreword.
I sometimes wonder if my broadcast career was rather self-limited, or self-limiting maybe, because I was known as a jack of all trades, i.e. If the mid-morning show needed filling, ask Neil, he'll do it for you. Need some news cover? Oh, ask Neil to put on his serious voice. If the afternoon show needed a last-minute stand-in, or ask Neil, here's your man, evening dance show, Neil will turn his hand to that. He loves a bit of Manchester, so he does. Lights are falling down in Studio 2. Where's Neil and his screwdriver? The roadshow van needs driving because the star won't drive it. It's a van. Oh, don't worry, we've got a Neil. Put your truck driving pants on, son. I've got really all manner of experience, including stunts and stuff like that. So I'm being cautious to think of it as a negative thing, but it's certainly affected opinion, I think, toward me and my abilities from those what managed the place. And I think to some extent I took that to heart when changing life direction in my 30s and going into, well, a life of photography. I thought this time, I'm going to choose a specialist subject, i.e. an area of activity or work or study that somebody concentrates on or is an expert in. Thank you, Oxford Dictionary. See, being a specialist gives you a chance to really get to grips with a subject. You can read it, you can second guess it. And more importantly, and in my case, the people I photographed trusted me, and they booked me because, well, they saw that I'd lived the experience that I was photographing over and over. It is what I do. Wedding photography, I mean, you don't go to a librarian when you need a tooth extracting, do you? unless you need him to tie that tooth to a great big old-fashioned encyclopedia that you go and drop out of the second floor window. So yes, I decided to specialise in a genre. Honestly, I was not expecting to at all. There was no great life calling where I woke up of a morning thinking, you know, what I really need to do today is go and photograph a wedding. No life calling at all. No euphoric moment of epiphany. None of that at all. But I became quite adept at spotting who to keep one beady eye on for the currency of emotion. And that's why I think the genre actually suits me. And whilst I do photograph and film other things, I think I've, well, unexpectedly become life invested in the I do market. I have these grand plans that I get to 1,000 and that's it, no more after that. But the reality is, notwithstanding, of course, COVID means I'll have to work until I'm 84 and a half. Notwithstanding that, the reality is that I feel positively confident toward the genre that I have chosen. So when COVID came along, I mean, we all know what happened to certain industries. Let's perhaps not go there again, although we kind of need to revisit for this example. I did ironically chortle at my decision to put all my eggs into one specialist basket, having been told that's what I should do all my life. And I wondered, had I continued with my belief in the almighty skill of being a jack of all trades, whether that 2 years might have seen me enjoy the process of juggling, well, I suppose, if I'm going to correctly use the analogy, lots of different types of eggs from different birds. So they weren't all the same egg in the same basket. Does that make sense? I think so. Look, this is a reasonably long-winded way of saying one of my guests today wears the badge of Jack very well indeed. He is a superb storytelling photographer. He's raised millions of dollars for childhood cancer research, started a non-profit that democratized philanthropy, launched a headshot photography business. He's given speeches in front of thousands of people, exhibited artwork, designed websites, mentored students, grown a social media following, and, well, let's just say he picks up new hobbies and interests like it's his job, to quote a little from his bio, that is. And I'm enthralled to be able to talk with him today, because honestly, it is, and this was what I found particularly wonderful about the conversation with him. It's his can-do-ness, if there's such a word, that's so inspirational. He has and I will use this in the interview, so apologies for the spoiler. He has this youthful naivety, and I'm sure he won't mind me saying that no doubt is one of the key drivers in our conversation today and what we talk about. If they, whoever they are, could somehow service youthful naivety up as a booster injection, I would be in line, arm bared, shouting, "Hit me up with some of that, please, Doc." But I was really drawn to him by the following story, actually. He photographed 1,000 strangers from 48 states in 84 days on a 50-year-old camera and asked each person for one piece of life advice. Simple, powerful, and I would imagine personally life-enriching for him. But also today, I would like for you to meet another guest. Yes, we have two. An extra miler this time, Jon Buscall, who's been a mentor to me since the very first days of this podcast, when it was slightly different in its style. I saw something on his Twitter feed that stopped me in my tracks a few months ago. It was a picture he made of his father, and I suspect one of the very last pictures he made of his father. We talk about the importance of making that picture. Not just that one in terms of Jon's life story, but that one in terms of all our life stories and experiences, which complements the assignment set earlier this week by Cara Mew on Monday, when she asked us to make that picture, the one we might not be able to get tomorrow. With Jon, I talk about legacy today, and also adoption, which is not very photographic, I'll give you that, but it will kind of feed into a story later on this winter that I'm hoping to photographically record. But one of the most important things that I talk about with Jon, perhaps the overarching subject of our conversation, our chat that we had, is why the still image, why the photograph is so very, very, very precious.
Today on the Photowalk.
I think as a photographer, taking photographs is a language. It's a way of articulating what's going on inside, our responses to the external world. And part of that tweet was a reworking of something I tweeted many years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, because I do feel that photography, it captures that moment. So in a way, it is that sort of defense against time.
Stories of life told by photographers. And today those stories come from Jon Buscall, who you heard there, Imran Nuri, Roger Gassman on street art, Henrik Saxgren on the beauty of the wilds of Greenland, Neil Gaiman on daring to do just what you want because you haven't read the rule book, and Joel Meyerowitz on a love for photography, and you. It's a unique, special kind of podcast made from your letters that you send in and the thoughts you have about making pictures, whatever and whoever you make them for, whether you're a full-time pro or somebody who just likes to collect life in whatever box you carry. Be that a large plate camera with bellows and wonderful wooden heritage tripod, a thumping great DSLR with a battery pack bolted to the undercarriage, or a beautiful vintage twin lens reflex camera. A T-Watt flex thingy what, Neil? Well, we'll talk about those later on in the show. Or, of course, your smartphone. It's a show about how making pictures makes you feel, what it does for you and others around you. And there are billions, 6.6 billion at last count, of people who feel the same way around the world with something that they can make a picture with. So we are not walking alone. In the mailbag today, what made you fall in love with picture making? A bit more on when a photograph is no longer a photograph. The most incredible story about somebody who you would never believe has imposter syndrome. Ambition, urban art that's 30,000 years old, and making rugged pictures in rugged weather on rugged coastlines. So, shall we walk then? Checklist out, coffee and Garibaldi's packed, check. Boots on and laced, check. Very warm walking trousers for very cold, rugged coastlines, check. Spare batteries, check. Hand warmers, check. I think we're overdoing the rugged weather thing now, Neil. Memory cards or spare film, check. Earbuds in, check. Lens caps off. Let's walk. I'm just losing the mist now, which is, well, it's not surprising because I've walked away from the lakes and the rivers and the canals that I like to walk along these days with my Photowalk. It's become my, is it haunt? Haunt always seems quite a negative connotation to me. It's my haunt. It's where me and the Barnes, Sir Barkalot, like to hang out. He's been very quiet this morning. You right, Sir Barkalot? No barking. Oh, you wait, he says. Definition of the word new. Here we go. An adjective. Introduce or discovered recently or now for the first time, not existing before, or already existing but acquired recently. Neil, you've become quite the dictionary today. See, I read that, not necessarily. See, new doesn't necessarily have to be showroom new, does it? Like it's never been out of its box before, like it's one of those cars that's only done like 5 miles before you take it as the first new owner. But no, being able to appreciate the newness of something because it's a new, and this is the apposite word, it's a new experience to you. And that is the beauty of buying quality used camera kit from our friends at mpb.com. It's new, but not necessarily new. It's new to you. And I got a letter from our friend Bob Demers in Tucson, Arizona. You know Bob, the one who lives amongst the rattlers and cacti that seemingly jump out at you. And he's just been shopping on mpb.com for a new lens. Well, new to him. It's a Fujifilm 35mm f2 lens. And you'll see his portrait. Oh no, don't do that, pups. There was me saying he's behaving himself. He's rubbing himself in something. Don't do that. I'm doing the MPB bit. Come on. These are the people that support us, pups. Yes, he's bought a Fujifilm 35mm f2 lens, and you'll see his portrait of it, because you can make a portrait of inanimate objects or things. They don't have to be living, breathing things, do they? And it's on the show page today. Along with it, the words from his letter. Hi, Neil. You, oh dear, I feel like I'm being told off, are responsible for this, ! Which makes it sound like I'm in a lot of Barney rubble. But no, Bobby's happy. He says, I'm a first-timer with MPB, all because of your endorsements. Not disappointed. Oh, no, love this. And this bit's the important bit, by the way. I love this new-to-me lens. See? Bob is shopping in the circular economy, a part of the sustainable way of shopping, proud and happy to be doing so. And he's ended up with a terrific lens to use on his camera, and I'm looking forward to seeing Bob. Hint, hint. I'm looking forward to seeing pictures from said camera and said lens. I will, Neil. I'm answering for Bob there. And you don't just buy from mpb.com, who support this show. You can sell kit that you no longer use, trade it for something else, or do, of course, what Bob did if you live in America, the UK or Europe. And unlike many other online markets, then mpb.com is just the place to go for quality and price. You get a buyer's guarantee as well, which is not something you get from all online places that you purchase from, is it? You'll find a link to mpb.com who support this show, and I'm very grateful that they do. Now, this would have been a wonderful picture. There's a barge coming towards me. If that had been looming out of the mist, it would have been great. But it's not. I'll get a picture, though, as it gradually goes past me. Oh, what a wonderful life, eh? Barging. You might be able to hear it just in the background. There's a nice reflection. There's Barney in the foreground as well. He's on his lead because I don't want him to go swimming. Here we go. Fabulous. It's beautifully painted, as you'll see on the show page today. I love the painting along the side. That's great. Really nice. Very different. Enjoy your day. Come, pups, this way. Come on. By the way, if you go to Bob's website, which I will link to on the show page, there is a wonderful quote that greets you the moment you land. My first love, it started here, it will end here, says Bob on his website. When I was 12 years old, Bob's words, my best buddy and I each chipped in 25 cents at a church bazaar, and I bought a Kodak Instamatic camera. My buddy's mom had enrolled him in the local camera club where we had access to the club darkroom. They had a contest coming up, so I thought we'd enter a picture. I had a life-size plastic skull. I wonder how many people started with props like this, where they were producing pictures for the darkroom. And my buddy borrowed one of my mum's wine glasses. We did a little setup with the skull and the glass in the club studio. A little statement on the dark side of booze, perhaps. Ah, I see. Commentary through your abstract composition. I lit it, he says, with a big old scoop light, and we shot the tableau with our little Instamatic. We processed the film, printed the image, and lo and behold, we won one of the categories in the contest. I wasn't actually an official member of the club, so I had to keep mum about my participation. But I was so mesmerised by this process of photography, I didn't care. And here is where it all started. And this has got me thinking, actually. I know from time to time you furnish me with with the why of your start. But I wonder if I could ask you today to tell me your stories. Like Bob's 3 paragraphs that I read for you just a moment ago from his website. What was it about the picture-making process that bit you? What was it? It could be a few decades ago, I suppose, like Bob's story, or it may be just 6 months, in the last 6 months or so. I do get letters from those that have started up this glorious life-watching habit, because that's what it becomes, isn't it? Who've started in the last year, less than 6 months sometimes. So send your stories to stories@photowalk.show. I think this is a good time to take our first inspirational clip of the day. The great documentarist and street photographer Joel Meyerowitz, who told me the story in episode 283 earlier on this year of how he fell in love with photography.
You know, we all have the responsibility of being awakened to our potential, and it doesn't always come from inside. Sometimes somebody outside puts the key in your lock and just turns it enough for you to catch a glimpse of possibility, which was all that happened. I wasn't a photographer. I wasn't interested in photography. I had no camera. I was still a painter and a graphic designer and working in a small agency, and I designed this booklet, and Robert was the hired photographer. I had no idea he was Robert Frank, but he was a friend of my boss's. And so Harry, my boss, said, just go down and make sure he gets all the pictures for the booklet. I went there. He paid me no mind whatsoever, Robert. But watching him work, and really even more than watching him work, hearing the click of the Leica and seeing the action in front of him when the click happened was an epiphany. Because I was looking over his shoulder the whole time. I was behind him, off to the side. But I could see these gestures appearing in front of him that either happened spontaneously or that he motivated by a few soft words. There were two young girls he was photographing. But it was as if every moment that had a peak, he made a picture of it. And I didn't understand it until I saw it repeated again and again, the high point. Because as a painter, when I had been in art school and we were doing life drawing and everything, I was always looking for the gesture on the model's part that released some recognition, even without words, but something that became visually dynamic in some way. So I probably had some carryover of that. In any event, watching him for a couple of hours really was stimulating. And when I left the shoot to go out on the street and go back to the office, suddenly the street was alive in a way it had never been before.
Come, Pops. Come on. He looks absolutely filthy today. We had a lot of rain last night, and there's plenty of it along this towpath we're walking. You're filthy. This way. No, you're not going in the river. Joel Meyerowitz there, and Bob Demers, of course, with his story about his new-to-him lens, which, hint, hint, I'm looking forward to seeing those pictures, Bob. And, of course, mpb.com, the people to go to for quality used camera kit, whether you're trading or buying or selling. Letters. Let's do some feedback from last week's show. 2 letters on when a photograph is no longer a photograph. And one on imposter syndrome. Because you have to work in triplets, don't you? In triptychs, to use a photographic phrase. Let's start with Judith McDermott, who feared that her floral art photographs manipulated and textured on a computer, not necessarily, no longer photography. Maybe not feared. Feared is perhaps too strong a word, but there was an element of self-questioning without a doubt. And I wondered after I read the note, and of course it was on the show page last week, and you can see Judith's pictures that she's talking about on the show page, Judith's photographs on the show page from last week. But I wondered if some of the doubts came from things that had been said in groups, perhaps Facebook groups, maybe camera clubs, I don't know. Perhaps that introspection over whether her photographs, when she digitally manipulates, no longer are photographs, and whether you don't feel like a photographer anymore when you're making them. Anyway, you had some support, actually. One came from Sarah Moorcroft on the comments page. Just listening to another thought-provoking episode. Thank you. Well, you're more than welcome, Sarah. Thank you for listening. With reference to Judith's question about photography / photo art, surely, if it's honest and starts in your camera with something that inspires you in front of the shutter, then it's simply photography. End of. How you choose to... Well, she didn't say end of. I'm editorializing. How you choose to post-process can create something individual, something special and from your own mind. Creating art, even taking a photograph to perhaps a new level. I too am loving photo art, says Sarah. It's fun, it's personal, and it's creatively very enjoyable. These flower photos are lovely artistic pieces. Thank you, Sarah, for your support there. And one came as well from Vinnie Giannino. This is in, it's very busy on the railway today, isn't it? They're doing some work, so everything's going very slow and they're kind of stacked up. Train after train after train. There we go. Gathering a bit of momentum. Yes, Vinny, thank you for your mail. This is in reference to Judith McDermott's question of, is it a photograph or is it art? My answer is, it's both. Judith took the photos, so it is photography, but by combining them, because there were textures, I should probably explain, Judith's pictures had textures overlaid, entwined, if you like, within them. By combining them, it is her art. It would be different if she downloaded items and then combined them, or used AI that can make a picture, not a photograph, in the creation of the image. But no, she made the textures. Yes, she did. She photographed the textures. She photographed the flowers. She combined them. The whole process was Judith's work. You're right. As you said, Neil, photos have been manipulated for a very long time, even to the point of double exposures in the film days. I think we have to stop thinking that all photography is point at something, take a photo, and that is it. Nothing wrong with getting creative and using one's imagination. By the way, the photos, Judith, he says, are great. They are, as I say on last week's show page, which is episode 340. And then here's one from Eric with a K, Eric Peterson in Denmark land, and it follows our conversation about one of our evergreens, something we like talking about quite a lot, imposter syndrome. Hi Neil, life is cyclic. I was listening to the Photowalk today and listening to the thoughts on the dreaded imposter syndrome. I feel I should carry around an echo chamber as I say those two words to make them sound more grisly. Is that the right word? Grisly? Probably not. Funnily enough, I was reading Neil Gaiman's words on the subject, and I'll come back to Neil Gaiman in a moment if you're not so familiar with that name. You'll love this story, says Eric. If you're like me, and you like to work stories out as they go along, you kind of second guess the ending that Eric's about to tell us. There'll be a moment of realization coming up that makes you do an audible double take, I promise you. An exclamation perhaps will appear before your eyes, and definitely a broad smile. I know it did for me, Eric. Some years ago, says Eric, reading Neil Gaiman's words, Neil Gaiman being the author, I was lucky enough to be invited to a gathering of great and good people, artists and scientists and writers and discoverers of things. And I felt that at any moment they would realise that I didn't really qualify to be there among these people that had, well, really done things. On my second or third night there, I was standing at the back of the hall while there was some ongoing musical entertainment, and I started talking to a very nice, very polite, slightly older gentleman about several things, including our shared first name. And then he pointed to the hall of people and said words to the effect of, oh, I just look at all these people and I think, what the heck am I doing here? They've made amazing things. I just went where I was sent. And I said, Neil Gaiman this is, yes, but you were the first man on the moon. I think that counts for something. And I felt a bit better. Because if Neil Armstrong can feel like an imposter, maybe everybody can. Maybe there weren't any grown-ups, only people who had worked hard and also got lucky and were slightly out of their depth. All of us doing the best job that we could, which is all we could really hope for. Words from Neil Gaiman, who shares, of course, the first name with Neil Armstrong. What a wonderful story, Eric. Thanks so much for that. I'm so pleased you took the time to send it in. I recounted the story, and I hope you got the idea as we were going along to Sam the other day. And when that realization that it was Neil Armstrong saying, well, I just got sent there, I didn't really do anything particularly special, there was this moment of, what? Neil Armstrong feeling like an imposter? Surely not. Eric adds, I like the attitude that we can work through it and use it as fuel to get better. Imposter syndrome, that is. Currently, he says, I'm stuck in a rut and I need to find a way out. I want to take pictures, but most of the ones I do become, blah. They seem to have no emotion, and I'm simply going through the motions. My photo club will get its portfolio, as we do every year, but I'm not really very excited about it this year. It's autumn and the end of the year. Winter is for recharging and getting better. So when spring comes, we go out with a new energy and start over. Best regards from Eric. Isn't it interesting, Eric? And do you remember, because you're an extra miler, on the Sunday show I talked about that project, one man's trash. And not that I would dare to use that word to describe your pictures and your compositions, but in terms of the sentiment, in terms of the idea, one man's not so inspiring could be somebody else's gold. That's what I find really interesting here, because I see your work, I know your work, and I've never thought of it as uninspiring, and certainly not blah. So, yeah, it's all about interpretation, isn't it? Personal interpretation. You mentioned Neil Gaiman, though. So, he is an English author of short fiction and novels and comic books and graphic novels and non-fiction and audio theatre and films. And, he's certainly achieved. He is the author's author. Anybody who is lauded by Stephen Fry must surely fit the author's author description. And I'd like to play an inspirational clip, actually, from him. And I will share on the show page the video that this inspirational clip comes from. There's two videos that I want to share with you. And the first video that I'm taking the clip of audio from will be of a commencement speech he made at the University of the Arts in London, which is where I saw Billy Joel play a surprise pop-up gig once. I'm sure it was there, pretty sure. And the second is one of him calmly talking about having belief in yourself, which I think fits very, very, very well with the letter about imposter syndrome today. So it was difficult to know which clip to play you, but here comes the one I've chosen from the commencement speech. And I think it covers the topic we often talk of, that being the changing face of the arts, the exciting changing face. And in our case, photography. And this easier journey to sharing what we do online and having the courage to, you can see the rest on the film on the show page today, but I'm going to take a few words from the very, very close of the film, and you may feel it's a spoiler, but what comes before it is just as enriching when you listen and watch it, and I think it's all very relevant, to be honest. You know, it's a great shame that commencement speeches only seem to happen for young students, because I think we could all do with commencement speeches every now and then, couldn't we, in our lives? In my case, I started my new life in my mid-30s, my photographic life. Some are starting in their 40s and their 50s and their 60s and beyond. And perhaps we should have a university of life that we could all go to, you and I, to hear people like Neil Gaiman deliver our commencement speech. Neil Gaiman.
We're in a transitional world right now, if you're in any kind of artistic field, because the nature of distribution is changing. The models by which creators got their work out into the world and got to keep a roof over their heads and buy sandwiches while they did that, they're all changing. I've talked to people at the top of the food chain, in publishing, in book selling, in music, in all those areas, and no one knows what the landscape will look like 2 years from now, let alone a decade away. The distribution channels that people had built over the last century or so are in flux for print, for visual artists, for musicians, for creative people of all kinds, which is on the one hand intimidating, and on the other immensely liberating. The rules, the assumptions, the now we're supposed to's of how you get your work seen and what you do then, they're breaking down. The gatekeepers are leaving their gates. You can be as creative as you need to be to get your work seen. YouTube and the web and whatever comes after YouTube and the web can give you more people watching than old television ever did. The old rules are crumbling and nobody knows what the new rules are. So make up your own rules. Someone asked me recently how to do something she thought was going to be difficult. In this case, recording an audiobook. And I suggested she pretend that she was someone who could do it. Not pretend to do it, but pretend she was someone who could. She put up a notice to this effect on the studio wall, and she said it helped. So be wise, because the world needs more wisdom. And if you cannot be wise, pretend to be someone who is wise, and then just behave like they would. And now go and make interesting mistakes, make amazing mistakes, make glorious and fantastic mistakes, break rules, leave the world more interesting for your being here. Make good art.
I think I will, Neil. I think I will. That's Neil Gaiman. Some inspirational words. And as I say, do go to the show page today to see those 2 videos that I talked about just prior to playing you that clip. I also think it's very fitting that my first guest today lives by the very thoughts Neil had about not subscribing to rules, not being in any way tethered by traditional thinkers saying, you know, that's really not the way it's done. You heard my intro at the start of the show today talking about Imran Nuri, so I'll not repeat it word for word. And you're about to hear me recount a little of the backstory again in a moment from my studio as I talk with Imran. It was one of our extra milers, Mike Crawford, who introduced me to Imran's work. So thank you so much for that. Let me read his words, the letter that came through to me from Mike. Hi, Neil. Thought I'd let you know about a young American photographer called Imran Nuri, who could be of interest for you on the Photowalk. I heard an interview with him on All Through a Lens podcast, which is a great show if you don't know it. I must admit, I know a lot of photographic podcasts and listen to a fair few. That's not one I'm so familiar with, so I will take your suggestion. Have a listen. He took it upon himself to drive all over the US and photograph 1,000 people and ask them for life advice, record their answers and photograph them. He's not quite sure what he's going to do with the work, says Mike, but it's certainly a project involving photography and sound. Sounds incredibly ambitious, he says, but he seemed to take it all in his stride. I'm still trying, says Mike, to find the time to work on small print projects and books and zines, and failing miserably. Hope all is well with you, from Mike. Well, Mike, it is. Thank you so much for your suggestion, because it was from that I reached out to Imran and had the following conversation you're about to hear. And I think if we're learning anything today, that's to stop listening to the voices that tell us we're failing. Because maybe another way to think about it is it's just that sometimes our projects are on sabbatical. Hang on, here's a gate. And that we need to, well, I suppose pick them up from the airport at some stage when it suits and start all over. We start this week's conversations then with Imran Nuri and his philanthropic outlook on life and photographic projects. A proud jack of all trades and an avid storyteller. Your introductory words. And there's just the minor point of raising millions of dollars for childhood cancer as well, which we'll talk about. For all those who cruelly use the analogy of jack of all trades being a master of none, this is proof of just how powerful an asset the all-round ability is, isn't it?
I think so. You know what? I am just always thirsty for knowledge. I love learning, and that's always been the case, even as a kid. The way I've always approached everything is I want to know everything that there is to know about something before I move on to the next one. And when I move on to the next one, I'm accumulating, right? It's like a collection of knowledge. And so from the time I was, 5, it has always been that way. I'll dive headfirst into something, and now I'm 25. And so over the last 20 years, whatever I've dove headfirst into, it's all there. And so I really do feel like I'm that master of, jack of all trades, master of none, and still adding to my collection of knowledge.
Does that mean then you never finish a project? I know the 1,000 portraits you have, but we'll come to that. But does that mean that you've got many projects that are in the outstanding or pending file? I think so. I mean, I have been oil painting and drawing for a long time, ever since I was a kid. And that was something I also had learned a lot about. There are plenty of drawings and unfinished paintings that are just sitting around. They'll never be finished. They're just going to sit like that forever. I think when something is really, truly important, I'll see it through. Yeah. But sometimes, with the drawing, it's like this would be ideal if it was finished, but it's not the end of the world that it's not. Are you an artist then, or are you a photographer? Because I know the art came before the photography. And I dare say, actually, Imran, that the art probably is really important for the photography.
Yeah, the word I used for myself before was artist, and I still stick with that now. And what I'll explain to people is I'm an artist. I primarily work with photography because I still paint a little bit here and there, but I don't. What I used to want to create with oil paints that would take me, up to 100 hours to finish one piece, I can now create with photography, and it'll still take, it might take a dozen hours, maybe it'll take 24 hours at most, but I now create those kind of hyper realistic ideas with a hyper realistic medium.
I mentioned in my introduction, just to go back to the jack of all trades just for a moment, I mentioned in the introduction to the show that being a jack of all trades was something that thwarted the advance of my initial broadcast career. Well, I believe anyway. And I was told over and over and over again, be a specialist, get a specialist subject. You probably would say that being a jack of all trades is the thing that gives you that variety and spice of life.
Yes, exactly. I think it gives me a confidence even in my day job to be able to find so many different careers. And I think being a jack of all trades at surface level is probably limiting. But, for example, I found that the world of startups and entrepreneurship really values people who come in with that breadth of experience and random knowledge because, you'll challenge ideas in parts of the company that you're not even working on and other people can work on it. And so, right now I'm working for a startup and that's been my background the last couple of years because they really value it. And if I were to go into a giant big four company, they wouldn't value a jack of all trades. They want specialists because they're a huge machine. And when you come in as a specialist, you're a good, sturdy cog in the machine. But startups aren't nice, organized machines. They're a mess. And so, I can see both sides. But I think for me, I that's why I called myself, the proud jack of all trades, because I see how I can add value in a lot of different ways.
I don't want to come across as the to use a colloquialism, the old fart that at double your age, over double your age, actually, that's saying, oh, look, this youthful naivety. But I think, and I've talked about this before, I think that, and you do broadly fit into this category, the youthful naivety, and I mean that kindly, is probably that one thing that you don't want to ever lose in life, isn't it? And I think right. As we get older, and I'm guilty for this, that sometimes you think, I just need to rewind and inject a bit of youthful naivety into me again.
Exactly. There are two books I reread every year to remind myself of this, and it's The Little Prince and it's The Alchemist. And both of these books are they are playful ways to remind myself that I shouldn't grow up. I can grow up in the ways that matter, right? I'll do self-work. I'll take care of my mental health. I'll get past any previous traumas. I'll do those things to become an adult. And I say that with quotes. Yeah. But as far as, like you said, the youthful naivety, that I want that forever.
Well, let's talk about this wonderful project, because this is why I contacted you initially. 48 states, 84 days. Oh, by the way, why the 4 states that were missing out?
Yeah, so the lower 48 states were all the states I could actually drive to.
Ah, okay.
Right. Anything else, the other two, like of the overall 50, I couldn't fly to them. So
yeah, all right, fair dues.
Hawaii and Alaska.
1,000 people to make portraits of, but just to add a little bit of spice as well, you decided to do it with a vintage camera, 50-year-old camera. We'll come back to that in a moment. You made a portrait, but you asked for some life advice. Where did the idea come from? Because 1,000 portraits in 84 days would have been enough as a project without turning this into your greatest life experience advice.
Yeah, the idea came from a couple different places. I think the initial idea of driving around the country and talking to strangers came when I was 21, and I was a junior in college, my third year, and I was seeing my friends getting internships at these huge companies for this following summer. And I remember sitting there in a discussion with my honors program, and I said, you know what? I don't know if I want to do the safe thing and get an internship and then get an offer and then go work this full-time job and do the thing I'm supposed to do. Or if I should really, really take this time where as a 21-year-old, I will never have this little responsibility ever again. Should I take a risk with knowing that I will be okay ultimately? And what I said to my class there, just in a moment of maybe randomness, was what if I just drove across the country and talked to strangers, because that's something that pushes me way out of my comfort zone. Yeah. Would I learn more from an internship at a big company, or would I learn more by talking to strangers across America? And that was the first time I spit the idea out. So that was 2019. Obviously, a few months later, really a year later from that moment, COVID hits, right? And so I graduated right there in the middle of the start of the pandemic in 2020 from Ohio State. And I was working on building a nonprofit at that time. And so I was working for myself. And I worked on that for about 2.5 years before shutting it down at the end of 2021. It just wasn't growing how I wanted it to. Started a full-time job at a startup doing marketing. And in all of that process of going through the pandemic, building my own thing, and then having to shut it down, I just thought to myself, if I was going to die in a year, if I was going to die in a year, what would I change about my life? What would I do in my final year? And the answer again came back to, I would drive across the country, I would talk to people, and I would figure out what is the meaning of life according to total strangers. It was totally clear to me. And so, at the end of 2021, start of 2022, I said, what, I'll work this job for the next couple of months, save as much as I can. And then I'll take out a personal loan for whatever I need after that. And I'm just going to do it. I'm going to go drive across the country. I'm going to ask people about what they think it takes to make the most out of life. And I'm going to have this transformative journey, and I'm going to photograph every single one of them so that I can share what I learned with people who couldn't do a journey like this.
Notwithstanding the camera, which I'll come to in a moment, because you made it perhaps you made it a bit more complicated by doing that. But I am intrigued by the logistics. You said you took out a personal loan. I didn't know that part of it, actually. So were you sleeping in the car as you were driving across America as well?
I absolutely was. Yeah. So I spent, I love the transparency of anything. And so full transparency, I spent around $10,000 to make this whole project happen.
Oh, right.
That's the cost of gas, which because of the Russia-Ukraine war, gas was double what I initially had budgeted for. So that's gas, food, film. I had to buy a new laptop, and then a bunch of other small expenses. So about $10,000. And even on that $10,000, I could only budget for hotels a few times. And I had friends here and there around the country, but most places I wouldn't. And so, I slept in my Toyota Camry at rest areas.
With regard to actually talking to people, had you been a street photographer before? Had you done some street photography? Because I know a lot of people find that going up to people that initially, I mean, you must be adept at it now after 1,000 people, but initially it's quite a nerve-wracking thing, isn't it? Finding somebody to say, can I take your photo? Can I ask for advice? Am I invading your space? Do you mind? And you become very almost, well, I do anyway. You may have a very different experience of it, but I personally become very apologetic.
No, that's exactly right. And I'm the same way. In 2019, when I had first thought of the idea was just to do something that would so radically push me out of my comfort zone that I would be forced to grow really fast. And that was still very much the idea here. Like the core reason beyond that, like if you were going to die in a year motivation, the core reason for doing this was personally to get over any fear of talking to strangers at all. And so this was this is the most radical way I could possibly think to get over that fear. But I practiced, I practiced beforehand. The first time I photographed a stranger and approached a stranger was summer of 2021. I was visiting Chicago before I was living there. And it took me 3 hours to build up the courage to talk to the first person. 3 hours.
You might say that you did complicate it by taking a 50-year-old camera, because had I put any flavor of mirrorless or DSLR compact, whatever really in your hand, you'd have been able to take 1,000, probably 5,000 pictures on a card. Job done, no problem. But you chose to photograph on a 50-year-old camera, which meant that you did have to inject some of this budget, a reasonable amount of this budget actually, into film and processing of. Why did you go that route?
I chose the camera and I used a TLR. I chose this twin lens camera because I knew it was going to be an easy conversation starter for talking to strangers. I just knew it. I was like, the vast majority of people alive right now probably have never had their photograph made on a TLR. And so I'd always hold it right there in my right hand as I was walking around looking for strangers to talk to. And it was always like, I almost think it made people trust me more because they look at me, some random guy, wearing yellow Crocs, coming up to them and saying, "Hey, can I ask you a question real quick?" And they see the old camera in my hand. And most people would probably guess, if they had no context of photography, they'd probably think a camera like that is 100 years old. So definitely a relic. And they look at it, and then they look back at me and they're like, okay, let's see what this guy has to say. That, and then the final reason being that when you use a twin lens camera, you're shooting from the waist level. And so all of your subjects look tall and confident and powerful. And I loved the idea that all 1,000 people, no matter what they looked like, no matter where they were, every single one of them looks confident and powerful and in charge. So whatever they said, I trusted it. From the photo, you're like, I would trust that person.
As an aside, by the way, and you mentioned them, and I'm glad you did because you reminded me, because I did noticed your bright yellow Crocs. I just want to show you that Imran, these are very old ones, but look, I'm a Croc wearer. They're not yellow, but I'm a fellow Croc wearer. Not sure.
You understand the joy that Crocs on feet. Yeah,
completely understand it. The 1,000 pieces of advice. Then will they lead to a book or a film or a talking book or all three or more? What's the plan?
Yeah, I see 3 avenues for how I want to present these photos. The first one being, TikTok and Reels and YouTube. And that's what I consider the free way. I want people to be able to experience this and learn from it totally for free. The second way being a book. I want people to be able to hold it. I want to be able to hold it. And, as photos are just better when you're holding them. Yeah. It just doesn't compare to what it looks like on a phone. And so the book will be kind of a way that I make a little bit of money from it, which was never an intention, but it'll be a way to make money for it and for people to experience it handheld outside of their phone. And the third way being, I hope that I can exhibit the work as well, just so that people can experience it in a third form. And that's kind of more like the artist cred thing, right? Just being able to exhibit it.
You made the entire 1,000, but did you go a few over? But did you just think, Imran, I'm enjoying this so much, I'm just going to carry on?
Yeah, you know what? I did not give myself the buffer I wanted to. I have a buffer of about 11 people. So inevitably, some of the photos are just not good. And I think as I've been looking through it, I'm not sure how many people blinked, but it's not very many. But a handful of people blinked, and so they might be the first to go. And I'll have to favor like the quality of the photo in that sense over the quality of the story they told me. But with a buffer of 11, I really should have given myself a much healthier buffer.
Well, look, 1,000 people, there must be particular pieces of advice that are really standout moments. Do you mind recounting some pieces of information you've been given? I know that's probably going to be the cliche press question that everybody asks you, so let me launch in there before you get bored with answering it. Right
now, from just my memory and as I look back on it, there were a lot of themes about relationships, trust, time, and making the most of it, being yourself. And I think there are a handful of people that especially stand out. I think the first one that really stood out to me on my trip was in West Virginia. I was at Harper's Ferry, I think it's a national park, and I'm crossing this bridge that is overlooking a river and these beautiful hills. And I see this mom and son coming my way. And as a rule, generally, I didn't approach people in groups. I thought that I got higher quality interactions with individuals. But the bridge was so tight that we ended up talking anyway. They, of course, see my 50-year-old camera and they ask about it. And I ask them my question, what's something you know now that you wish you knew earlier? What's something you had to figure out the hard way? Something like that. I actually can't remember off the top of my head what the mom said, but the son was 23. And he goes, I actually got diagnosed with cancer a few years ago, and that really made me think about life and how short it can be. And he said, I should be in remission this summer, but I guess what I wish I knew earlier was just that it's important to appreciate every single moment. And as he elaborated, he kind of said, it's important to appreciate the good, the bad, and the in-between of everything that happens in life, because You don't know, you know, everybody wants to believe they're going to be 80 years old, but not everybody gets to. And so, you know, that piece of advice carried so much weight from a 23-year-old who has cancer. And it's such a simple message to just enjoy every single moment. It's even cliche, you know, but for him to say it, I was like, oh, you know, that could have been me. It still could be me. I'm 25, you know? And so that hit home. And another time that somebody said that exact same piece of advice in the exact same like tone and pacing was a 13-year-old kid. And again, as a rule, I didn't really talk to kids on this because there are photographic laws about photographing kids. This time though, I approached a father and he said, actually, he's the spokesperson, points to his 13-year-old son who said the same thing. I think it's important, or what I wish I knew earlier was to enjoy every moment. And I thought, that's so interesting. How did you figure that out? He goes, well, I recently lost a friend, and that friend actually took his own life. And so this 13-year-old kid has an unbelievably tragic understanding of how fragile life is. And so those two stuck out so much compared to any other one. And both of them being that they're young and they're experiencing something that nobody should really ever have to experience. But if they do, they typically don't experience it till they're, you know, older. You know, those things stuck out. But aside from that, I think one of the biggest themes that I saw people's faces light up was that the people who told me that they just wish they would have known earlier how important it is to be exactly who you know you're supposed to be. You could see it on their faces. They're like, once I let go of societal pressure and cultural pressure, I became the best version of myself I've ever been. I'm so happy, I'm thriving, and I just wish I would have felt this way sooner.
If I'd have done this project, I would say it's a life-changing project for me. You get to do this life-changing project reasonably early on in your career and your life. I mean, there's no other word than privilege.
Exactly. That's right. It was like the timing of everything and the way it worked out was just perfect. You know, I didn't have a lease that I was attached to. I had a little bit saved up and I had good enough credit to take out a personal loan. I had a great support system. So in addition to the savings and personal loan, I also had a Patreon where people supported it through Patreon. And so I had an amazing support system. I had quit my job to do this trip. And part of that was because I was like, I know how hard I worked in college to build the skills and network that I have no doubt that I'll be able to get a job when I get back, which was the case. I got a job really quickly after I came back. And so there's so many different pieces of privilege that play into me being able to do it. That's why I feel like I owe it to everybody to share it.
Philanthropy. I like that you've pointed out it's not just something for big foundations. We're all really able to be that, aren't we? Or at least budding philanthropists. It's those everyday philanthropic moments that we can have, gestures that we can make, isn't it?
100%. I think the way that I was taught about philanthropy, it really at an early age was that my parents had me put $1 or some change in an empty peanut butter jar that we would keep above our fridge. And at the end of each week, or sometimes at the end of each month, we would take whatever money's in there. And at that time, we would send it to villages in India because the money would go further there than it could here in the US. And so that's how I learned about it. It was like giving pennies or dollars at a time, and that it could still make an impact. And then as I grew a little bit older and got a better understanding of what philanthropy is, it was like, okay, your philanthropy is about time, talent, and treasure, right? And so now it's like, this project to me is as a non-traditional way of being philanthropic, in that I used my time, talent, and treasure to create this series. And now I can use my talent to share it with TikTok and YouTube and Instagram, and then turn it into a book and, just share it forward that way. And that's different from, say donating to your local nonprofit. But yeah, you're right. Ultimately, like, that's the way I see philanthropy, is that it's not something that's just for the 1%. It doesn't have to be millions of dollars. It's whatever you can afford.
A friend of mine in London opened an agency many, many years ago, and he called it Why Not? And it wasn't why not with a question mark. It was why not with an exclamation mark.
Yeah.
And I have a feeling that you and Andy would get on really very well. And you strike me as somebody who, had Andy not invented the company with that name, that you might have done that. And I'm intrigued. What's next?
That's a great question. I don't know what's next. What's next is really just putting the project out there for other people to benefit from. At the end of the day, what I think about is, as people read or hear the life advice that all these strangers gave me, I hope that even just, it might sound cheesy, but at least one person just gets something out of it. So that at least one person sees a piece of advice and says, I really needed to hear that today. And the very first piece of advice, that guy, the first person I met on my journey, his life advice was really simple. It was just, I wish I would have spent more time with my parents before they passed. And I just know that as people see things like that, they're going to reflect on their own lives and what needs to happen. And if it's a kick in the butt to go do something you've been meaning to do, great. And if it's just a little bit of inspiration, that's fine too. I hope that its ultimate impact is that it unifies people in a way that the US definitely needs right now, but I think even just the world needs a little bit more of like, that person doesn't look like me, they don't live anywhere near me, but wow, they've gone through the exact same life experience that I've gone through. And just a reminder that we all have a lot in common that we don't focus on.
Imran Nuri, and of course I'll link to him and his projects today on the show page. Two guests today. Coming soon, my conversation with Jon Buscall, who made his extraordinary picture a few months ago that I saw on Twitter that matches the conversation set at the week of the head of the week really, by Cara Mew when she set the assignment that we had this week. You were asked to make that picture, the picture that is important to you, that if opportunity didn't or doesn't arise again, you wonder why you didn't make it. A couple of letters. First, a short and sweet one from Tyler Booth on episode 334, Words on a Wall, where I talked with Roger Gassman about the documenting of subway art. In particular, the photographer Martha Cooper's work, who's dedicated her life. She flies around the world actually doing this. It sounds a terrific life. Photographing street art, graffiti, that sort of thing. Neil, really interesting to hear Roger Gassman talking about Martha Cooper's work. Like you, I have a fascination for photographing graffiti and an appreciation for what others might find, I suppose, intrusive. It's a fine line appreciating it and also understanding that it breeds a contempt for public property. In other words, any space can become graffiti space. I don't know what the answer is there, but we certainly have much to show in Ilford, my photographic stamping ground. But I wanted to share with you the work of Nico Gooden in London, who could be a good guest. He's a successful commercial photographer who says that graffiti photography, or photographing graffiti and street art, was the conduit to his interest in becoming a photographer in the first place. His website isn't necessarily full of this now, but there's a fair bit, and I think you'll find it interesting. Tyler, I did. And do you know what? I'd like to see some of your work, since you said that you're inspired to photograph graffiti too. I have, however, linked on the show page today to Nico's work, and I recognised instantly some of the places in London that he's photographed, where I've photographed street art, and one of those being Shoreditch, very trendy Shoreditch. The let's adore and endure each other message painted large on the side of a building. It's on the top of it's a sort of a warehouse space, I think, but on the top of it, just above those, that painting that he did, and I don't know whether this is an extension of his street art or not. There's two tube trains lifted up, obviously by a crane, plonked on the top of this building, that sometimes are painted, sometimes not, it seems. But I tell you what, let me link to them, or link to the picture of that place, because I looked, I couldn't find the image that I made. It will be somewhere. I saved it, I know I did, but where? There's too many files. Neil, you need a much better cataloguing system. You're not wrong there at all. But I'll also link to Nico's work so that you can see this place. You'll see it straight away, and also other works that he's made, other photographs that he's made. And here's one from Colin Mayer, whose pictures will be on the show page today. Hello, Neil. Can I start this letter with the acknowledgement of a country? All right, let's do that. I hope it's obvious why in a short while. And I think, actually, reading between the lines, that this is linked to the show that I talked about, that episode, as well. Perhaps inspired because we were talking about... Barney, come out. Oh, no, he's gone into it. No, come out. Good boy, come on. What's he doing? That's private property. That's the fish. That's get off my land property, that is. That's fishermen in there. No, that's not for you and I. Yes, I think this place that Colin's about to talk about was perhaps a letter. The reason why you've sent it in and the pictures that you've made that are on the show page today are inspired by that episode with Roger Gastman as well, who talked about Martha's work. Roger, of course, is a really good street artist himself. But I think that's what inspired you to write this letter in. Hello, Neil. I'll start again. Can I start this letter with an acknowledgement of a country? Yes, you can. I hope it's obvious why in a little while. Perhaps more so now that I've filled in some of the details. I'd like to pay my respects to and acknowledge the traditional custodians of Dharawal country, the land on which we meet virtually. I'd like to pay my respect to elders past and present and emerging for the wisdom that they share. And I'd also like to extend my respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who've left their stories on walls, but for over 30,000 years. We were talking about street work and street art from the 80s. This is 30,000-year-old street art of a variety, isn't it? The Australian Aboriginals have been using natural graffiti to tell their stories through rock art and stone carvings. For non-Aboriginal people like myself, it's easy to view rock art as an individual piece of art. I look at them, then I walk on to the next piece, just like, I suppose, flicking through images on Instagram. Most Aboriginal art sites were not intended to be viewed that way at all, though. They form an interconnected grid of sites or places or work, part of an overall story which is more than its parts. A local rock art site might tell a particular creation story which is connected to another rock art site, which might be a few hundred meters away. Some sites are a long distance apart, yet still connected through the dreaming stories that they tell. How wonderful is that? Occasionally, the traditional owners share these stories with me at smoking ceremonies, where a group of us get cleansed, usually at the start of a construction project to bring us good fortune. There's a YouTube film that is sent me of that process, which I'll share with you on the show page. I'm not sure why, says Colin, but I never photographed the Aboriginal art. I think it's possibly through a sort of deep respect for the people's culture. I feel somehow false capturing images that I don't necessarily understand the significance of. There's much modern graffiti that I don't like. It doesn't tell me a story, but there's so much more that really calls on us to learn from our mistakes and look after our lands, creatures and our people. They tell us useful messages if we care to look and interpret the stories they tell. They keep our cultures alive. Just going through the gate. Yes, a few local examples are attached, he says. Keep taking pictures, sharing stories, and listen to the messages they tell. The podcast brings many of these pictures to life for me, and I'm really grateful for that. Well, I'm really grateful that you wrote in and you shared some 30,000-year-old history with us. Very grateful for that. Thank you, Colin. And I think as an inspirational piece, we should play something from Roger Gastman, shouldn't we? Yeah. About street and subway art culture. A little bit younger than 30,000 years, granted. But here's Roger Gastman talking about street art.
I just loved doing it, and I liked being around my friend group. I was never an incredible graffiti writer. You know, I got better as I kept going, and if I kept doing it, I probably would have become a lot better. And as much as I loved it and still love it to this day, it was really the act of, being out there doing it, being along the train tracks, being in a train yard, climbing a rooftop. It was the mission. It was everything about it. It introduced me to so many of my friends that I still have today. And it taught me so much about different cities, different cultures. It was my education.
Roger Gastman as my guest. It would be good actually to get Roger back again, because he was talking about Martha Cooper's fantastic work as a documenter and photographer of urban street art and street art around the world. And Roger, as hinted, has quite the art background himself, both as a street artist and as a narrator on the subject, a commentator on the subject. So, and he set up this amazing space in LA, which featured urban art. And that's a conversation in itself at some stage. If you'd like to send in your stories, I'd love to hear from you. There's two ways to do that, really. You can email the show, which is stories@photowalk.show, stories@photowalk.show. And we also have various social channels, of course. We're on Instagram. We're on Vero, big champions of Vero. Well, we're going to be. It's building. And also we have a Facebook group. Now, there's a Facebook page, and there's equally a Facebook group. And in there, it's around about 1,700 members now. And in there we post pictures, we share our experiences, ask for advice, no question too daft. I often say, unless I'm asking it, but it's a safe place to share, a safe place to discuss your picture making. And we ask you, if you are posting pictures in there, just to say a bit about it, so that we have more of a story behind the photograph that you made, that you composed. Right, Kevin Rugland. Hello, Kevin. Has dropped a line into the show. It could be Rugland, couldn't it, actually? With some fabulous, gritty and grainy pictures of the coast of Norway land. And this comes, I think, maybe off the back of a letter from Johan Otterdal Etfeldt, who is a surfing photographer, and so much more, actually. Johan, as we found out, he's a musician as well. We have a talented community, we certainly do. Oh, excuse me, early morning train. Did you hear that, pups? Sounds like I'm nowhere near to get a picture for our Thomas, but it does sound like that could well be. Is it? Can I see it through the trees? A freight train. I love the way that Barnes is looking. Do you think it is? I've no idea. I'm trying to find a stick. Anyway, so as we found out, Johan is a multi-talented member of our community. And the pictures that go with this story from Kevin will be on the show page today. We were talking last week about surfing photography and that sort of rugged coastlines, and Kevin has sent in pictures to go on the show page today that very much follows that theme. Neil, I figured that it was a long time since I contributed to the show, but as I now have something to show, I wanted to share my latest trip. My brother and I decided to go on a walk together again now that he's moved back to the southern part of Norway, where I think you're based, aren't you? He's more sort of wildlife and landscape orientated photographer than me, and I'm a bit of a whatever I can feast my eyes on shooter. We decided to head to a small place at the tip of southern Norway called Lista, and today we visited Havike in Vanselista. This is a nature reserve with a focus on bird life, but it's also very popular with surfers and windsurfers. I've seen of late a move towards, what's it called? Kite surfing. Just incredible to watch. So skilled as well, where you've got the board and you use the kite is out, large kite obviously, enough to propel a full-size person, and you're surfing along sometimes flat water, but you're using the wind above you, of course, kite surfing, to be able to do so. So you can do it on, I suppose there's got to be enough wind, of course, but you could even do this on lakes. But it's often done just in it's sometimes a little bit further out to sea, but often a little bit further in towards coast, where there's that the wind with the surf breaking. You see the kite surfers. Oh, just amazing. What an incredible workout as well. And they jump sometimes. They jump, these kite surfers, well into the air. Sometimes, well, it looks like 30, 40, 50 feet into the air before they calmly sort of come back down to the surface again. It's fabulous to watch. Anyway, you weren't watching that, I know. You were watching surfers and windsurfers. It's also a big fishing community. So the place is riddled with small harbours and fishing vessels. We met some surfers enjoying the waves that this windy place provided. I even got the courage to ask if I could make some portraits. And they did. So here are some images from the first of many trips to come, as this is a land rich with places to take and make pictures and stories. If you ever get to visit somewhere near southern Norway, I highly recommend taking a trip there. Well, I will take your advice. I will. What wonderful, wonderful pictures. Thank you, Kevin. Rugged coastline images, which I love. And I get a sense, I really do, of the temperature, and that's quite a thing to be able to show in a photograph, isn't it? To be able to feel another sense, another dimension. So that can be, the temperature. That could be the smell, couldn't it? It really can. To experience it outside the dimension that it has, i.e., a still two-dimensional photograph, to experience other feelings such as the temperature, such as perhaps the smell. So it's fabulous, and your pictures do this. So thank you. And this is the second week in a row now. Careful, Neil. Make sure you've got enough in the cupboard. I have at the moment. I'm going to send you a flask because I think you're going to need some warm soup or coffee if you're going to cover this coastline more and more over the winter, as you suggest to me. I'll have to send two because there's the two of you. So I'll send one for you, one for your brother, and your part of the deal here. I would like a photograph, when they arrive, of course, of the flasks in situ in the wilds. I love rugged pictures, so make it a rugged show flask photograph, please. Right, inspiration. Barnes, come out of there. Oh, he's just found this field. Come away. There we go. Oh, I can see what you can see. Cattle. No, not playthings. Pups. Cattle. Right, I'm going to whisk you much further west than Norway and take you to Greenland, or as we would say, Greenland land, a country where the wilds and the rugged are part of day to day. I spoke to Henrik Saxgren last year. Now, this is exactly 100 episodes ago. So that's episode 242. We're at 342 today, aren't we? If you're looking for the show page with the pictures that we're talking about, this was 242. And actually, I wish I'd... Did I play some of this on what would have been more at the time on the Patreon channel? Turned out that Henrik was big friends with Salgado. And they have a mutual love of football. And at the time, because it didn't happen in 2020 due to the virus that shall not be named, but it happened in 2021. This is when I spoke to Henrik for this particular episode, that the Euro football competition was on, which would have been 2020. It was 2021, delayed by a year. And it turned out that Salgado and Henrik would swap texts and get quite animated about what they were seeing on the football pitch. Now, Henrik being obviously a Danish team fan, Salgado adopting the French team, they had some quite, how shall I say, spirited text conversations. And there's no reason why Salgado shouldn't be a football supporter. It's Brazilian after all, the land of the great, magical footballers. But I don't know, I just found that quite amusing, if that's the right expression. That's a story for another day. But yes, Greenland, stick with it, Neil, stick with it. It's Henrik's photographic canvas for much work and incredible book work that he does. His book, Ultimatula, is a savage book. If you look at the way of life, of hunting polar bear and seal, and of course most of us will never know what it's like to properly look for supper that doesn't come shrink-wrapped, or clothing that doesn't come in standard sizes folded neatly by the cashier. Most of us will never have to go hunting for our supper or our clothing for our warmth. It's one of my most prized books and was kindly gifted by Hegard the Dane. Hegard, where have you been of late? Hegard the Dane, who's been one of our esteemed members right from day one. He's been a patron and now an extra miler. And so this book, Ultimatula, by Henrik Saxgren, has these wild vistas, fantastic places that look like they're just not from this world. He described for us, didn't he, in the episode, how making photographs where the temperatures are very, very cold. What did he say? What was the minus temperature that he said? You'll hear it on the show. I'll link to it. But you couldn't take your gloves off for long. You couldn't load film because your fingers would just get frostbite immediately. But he has this love affair with this incredible country that he visits from Denmark. And here he is talking about his photographic yearning to make pictures there.
You know, before Greenland, I worked a lot in South America and on the West Bank and Gaza, and I felt I had to go very far away to concentrate. But I got a lot of response where people asked me, but don't you have something from your own vicinity, from your own place? And as you understand, Greenland is a part of Denmark. And I have been there 3 or 4 times before, but not doing something special about Greenland. But when I came to Thule, I realized that this behavior was not useful at all. It would even exclude me from doing my things. So I had to find another kind of zen within myself to just sit on the dog sledge and let it be and let it go and wait to see what the nature would bring. Of course, I had some ideas of the dangers I could meet, but because I found this calm side of myself, I found the silence, the zen. Actually, the only thing I did was to follow the hunters. And if they were close to a polar bear, I felt I could be close as well. As long as the dogs was between me and the bear, I felt safe. But I learned from the hunters. I just watched how they did and how they acted, and I did the same. So I was never afraid. Actually, if you have asked me before, would you ever have the courage to stand 5 meters from a polar bear? I would have said, you're kidding. I would never have that courage.
You can hear the leaves underfoot beginning to get a bit crispy. Autumn heading into winter, leaves dropping, changing colours, trees changing colours. Fabulous. Henrik Saxgren there, and I'll link to, as I say, his episode today. Send your pictures and your stories, please, to stories@photowalk.show, and some of the stories, some of the tales, I'll pick up and I'll send you a flask in return. Maybe because you've had to, I don't know, encounter polar bear on your way to make the pictures, or very cold and. Hang on, we've got a ford coming up against us. Go on, pups, you can go through that. It's not too deep. You're fine. Well, most of it's dried out. Or you've had to suffer for your art. I don't know. Or the story just amuses me. That'll be good enough for a flask. It's one of our show flasks. You can keep hot and cold drinks in. What's here, pups? Let's look up here. Come this way. Come. Let's have a look up here. Oh, look at that. It's amazing when you I just turn left and right. You find whole other walks, don't you, while you're making your photo walks. Should we see what's down there? Come on, let's go have a look. My thanks to, I just mentioned a moment ago, the Extra Milers. My thanks to them, those who go the extra photo walk mile to support this show. for the price of a cup of high street coffee or a roll of HP5 black and white film, which is my favourite film stock, a month on well, you can also pay annually. You can join us annually. You are the standby. Say it with me. I know what you're going to say, Neil. Are we the engine room that drives this show? Yes, you are. Very much. And without you and the growing support, honestly, there would be no show. So to support the show and walk with us for an extra mile at the weekends, just go to photowalk.show, click the orange button that says support the show, and you will find within the Patreon app, you will find extra shows, extra material. There's easily 100 and how many are there, pups? I don't know. I'm still looking for a stick. There's easily 110, 120 shows. They used to be called More. They're now called the Extra Mile. And of course, on top of that, we didn't this week, and I apologise, but it's been quite the week in and out of hospital and stuff like that, and looking after our Jack. This week we didn't have our midweek replay show where you hear unplugged interviews from the past 2 years, but it'll be back to normal next week. Zoom, of course, we have a Zoom meeting as well right at the start of the month, usually the first Tuesday of the month. And one of our esteemed members is Jon Buscall. Now, John made a picture of his father that I saw on Twitter a little while back. It was possibly one of the I didn't ask him within the interview, but it was possibly one of the last photographs that he made of his dad. And there was a message within this tweet that he made. This helicopter's going to go right overhead at a moment where I want to talk about... Now, I could press pause and start over again, but that would spoil the authenticity of the photo walk. What's that? I've got me spotting head on. That is a... is it military? I think it might be military. It's a little bit... Oh, no. I think that's... Is it a twin squirrel? No, Neil, that's military. Yeah, I think it possibly is. It's got the shape of a twin squirrel. Neil, this is Photowalk, the Photowalk, not the helicopter spot. You're absolutely right. Right, come on, let's go back to this, because it is it's an emotional piece, this. John made a picture of his father that I saw on Twitter, as I say, possibly one of the last photographs he made of Dad. And there was a message within the tweet, the post, about the significance, the importance of the still image, why it's such a precious, potent thing, the still photograph. And I want to talk about that with John in the conversation that we had during the week in a moment that you're about to hear. But with John, this is a winding conversation across quarter of an hour, maybe just a little bit more, which covers a personal topic to us both too, that being adoption. And you might think, hang on, Neil, adoption, what's that got to do with photography? Well, there's a story that I intend to make this winter that has something to do with my adoption and a photographic, and it will be a photographic pilgrimage. And that's really why I started touching on this subject with John. And it's photographic for him as well, as you'll hear in this chat that we have. So we dip in and out of the picture making environment, and I'm doing that more and more these days, it seems. And this it was one of those moments that was appropriate. And I know that you'll enjoy spending a little time now with John and I, as we, or rather he actually, unpicks the importance of the still image.
Firstly, John, my personal condolences over your loss. To lose your mother in early July, then your father 1 week after her funeral, I can't even imagine the feeling of loss in such quick succession. As summer becomes autumn and so very quickly winter, where are you now with your thoughts?
Well, first of all, thank you, Neil. Yeah, I'm doing okay. I live in a different country to where my parents lived. That was quite a big thing, just geographically and moving around and sorting things. But yeah, I've been working through a lot of old photographs. I've been scanning a lot of things that I found, those old Kodachrome slides. And I've just about come to the end of that, huge amounts of scanning. So I'm okay, thank you.
Now, I remember going through the loft of my mother and being really surprised to find the things that she kept. And you had those sort of surprises, didn't you? I think there were some CDs that I saw on Twitter.
That's right.
That's
right. My Japan collection from the very, very early 80s. I even got a like from David Sylvian on Twitter, which I think probably is right up there in my top 3 things in my life.
Yeah. Well, it's your pin post, though, on Twitter that had me so keen to talk with you, not just about the potency of, but the very nature of making pictorial legacy. And I'd like to share, if I may, the photograph. But let me also share, if I can, and read the post. My mother died July 4th, and then my father died 1 week after her funeral. This photo, taken 9 days before he died, reminds me that photographs help us hold on to life's fleeting moments. They're our only defense against time, our only evidence, sometimes, that we ever existed. The defense against time, which is very potent, very pertinent, particularly given the assignment of the week just gone, where Kara encouraged us to go and make the photograph today that we might not be able to make tomorrow.
Yeah, it's, I don't know. I think as a photographer, taking photographs is a language. It's a way of articulating what's going on inside, our responses to the external world. And part of that tweet was a reworking of something I tweeted many years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, because I do feel that photography, it captures that moment. So in a way, it is that sort of defense against time. And just to explain this the long way around, what I can say is that when I went over to visit my father, after my mother had died, I had scanned some slides that I'd been sent a couple of years ago. And it's incredibly difficult scanning slides, as anyone who's tried to do it will know, but my wife had bought me a very expensive scanner and I did. And I edited some and I printed a picture that my father had taken of my mother and his parents and my sister in the garden in Cambridge in about 1977. And I showed it to my father when I got to the UK, bearing in mind that my mother had died a few weeks before. And my father looked at it, and it was one of the most emotional things that I'd seen in him in huge amount of time. My father was 84 when he died. He was that generation of blazers and ties and, very, very smart. And this photograph really touched him. And I realized that looking at that picture, he saw himself in that his own father was very, very much like him as he had become at that point. He saw my mother in her youth, beautiful, young, smiling, everyone smiling at the camera. And then when my father died, just, 9 days later after I'd shown him this photograph, this was the photograph in the room next to him that he had. And so I made the connection between, here is a photograph my father took as a young man, or relatively young man, and he wouldn't have known that that was the photograph that would be next to him when he died all those years later. And so I found myself making connections between that.
The picture that you made of your father before he passed, I'd like you to describe why you made that picture, because when I look at it, he's looking away from the camera. It looks like a room full of things, maybe in a state of flux, perhaps.
Yeah, that's right. I'd flown in from Sweden. My father had decided as soon as my mother had died that he wanted to go back to the town where he had lived for 30 years, really was very keen to get back. So my sister had literally found him a very, very nice sheltered accommodation. And I arrived in the UK on the Monday, went straight up to Norfolk where he was living, went straight to the place, and he was moving back down to that town later that day. So my sister and her husband had been putting things together for my house, for my father's things to take with him. So literally I walked into a house that was full of flux. It was the first time I'd seen my father since my mother had died. He was obviously he was a bit disorientated in terms of what was going on. It was just a huge emotional shock for everything. And he and I sat there and we had a chat, and surreptitiously, I took a few photographs with my iPhone, and he got up to go and do something. And when I got back to Sweden, home to Sweden, that was the photograph that really jumped out at me, because here was my father in the last day in the house that he had shared with my mother, walking away, and he'd stopped eating really after my mother died. So he'd lost a huge amount of weight. So his clothes barely hang on him. So, it was a picture that really captured a wounded man. And although I didn't think my father would die so quickly, I was also very cognizant that this could be on the cards, because he was not eating and not drinking. And so I made a point of trying to capture as much without thinking about making a conscious decision to take photographs and thinking I will work through this later.
Was there I hope this doesn't sound inappropriate as a question, John, but was there a catharsis about your photography during that period? I know you didn't march around the house taking lots and lots and lots of photos, but you were thinking and I know you have a very photographic mind. I
was thinking, while I was doing this whole process of sorting out my parents' house, I had literally 4 days to go through the entire house. They're 50 odd years, to get 56 years that they've been together, go through it all, sort it, have the house emptied, put the house up for sale, and get back to Sweden. So I made a conscious decision while I was doing this, living in their house alone, which is a bit scary. I made the point that I would take photographs of everything and anything. And so I did. I photographed bits of letters. I photographed the mess on the desk. I photographed every single thing that I could possibly do whilst running around like a headless chicken. And I think it was a way of breathing, because you're caught up in the moment. And for me, it's very, very easy to go into hyper mode. And I just wanted to, I hate the word intentional, but I wanted to be slightly intentional of what I was doing while I was going through it.
Were your mother and father photographers? I know your grandmother worked for Kodak, but
yeah, that's right.
What about mum and dad?
No, not at all.
No,
not at all. Not at all. Actually, it's quite funny you should say that, because when I look through the photographs, my mother obviously had quite a visual eye. It's quite interesting. When you start scanning slides that you haven't seen since you were a small child yourself, you start to read them as a photographer. And in fact, I start editing them and color correcting them and cropping them slightly, and which actually in itself feels quite naughty. But that's what I did. No, only my nan worked for Kodak, in the very, very early 20th century, and was also involved in photography in the Second World War. But no one else. You mentioned something to me that was prior to our conversation. It's got nothing to do photographically with what's happened in the previous months. But I am intrigued to get your answer to it before I come back to talk. I've got another couple of photographic questions on it. But you mentioned to me that being adopted, as you are and as I am, that it brings a whole, another level or other levels to your loss. And I'm intrigued to understand myself as an adopted lad, what those levels are. Well, I think one of the things is, it's the visual aspect of it. Going back through photographs through the early 70s, I'm born 1970. When you going back through photographs, you see yourself visually as an outsider. It's, very, very, very clear. I'm incredibly Germanic looking, Austrian, Scandinavian on my biological parents' sides. Mum and dad weren't. And, I look like a very Germanic child, high cheekbones, bronzed, muscular and tall. And they don't. And when and going through photographs from back in the day, I could see how much I was an outsider. And one of the things that I've realized during my lifetime, having done a PhD in writing, is that visual thinking was fundamental from a get-go. I was a watcher. I was an onlooker. I used images as a way of interpreting a situation. Of course, now with the eyes of an adult that's been on a long journey and learned a lot of things about himself, I can reinterpret that child, that family dynamic that's going on in those photographs. And of course, that's also augmented by things like letters and things that you've found. For example, I found a letter from my grandfather which sort of literally said to my father, a child will be loved no matter what, which is, we're talking about the late 60s. So my grandfather would have been, a much older generation, to write something so moving. And I mean, it took my breath away.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you've got that sort of written narrative going on. And then you see, my grandfather holding my hand, as a 3-year-old child. So you've got sort of a network of connections about how, the visual brings it all together.
I found in the attic, when I was clearing the attic, I found a book that had been read to me, which I'd forgotten about, which was designed to describe and explain to a child who was, I don't know, 4, 5, 6, maybe younger, what adoption was. And so therefore it was never a problem to me. It was, I always felt that I was this special chosen one, not to sound like a former football manager, but I felt like that. And it was very strange. I don't know whether you experienced this in your life, and we certainly have gone off a tangent for a second, but I remember people, if I ever used to say, well, I'm adopted, quite happily and quite proudly, they would say, oh, I'm sorry to hear that, as if it was some kind of odd illness.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I do think it is it's a very, very complex thing. And I do think, taking it back to photography, as an adopted child, you do see how you stand out differently. Yeah. And just from a psychological perspective, if you look at the theory, the literature around adoption, a lot of it talks about a primal wound. No matter the intentions behind it, and no matter the good that comes of it for the child, in many psychologists will still refer to it as the primal wound. And then when you go back to photographs, you do see your relationship, you do see your position as the child within that. And perhaps part of my own photography journey, taking photographs of Dad towards the end, is about me. And of course, I'm interpreting this afterwards, it wasn't something I was conscious of at the moment that I hadn't thought of, is like you are capturing these memories, you are taking these pictures because pictures and family are important.
Yeah. Why, by the way, do you choose Twitter to tell your photographic life, John?
I absolutely hate Instagram.
I know you. I know you're not that keen on it.
No, I think partly because, as well as a visual person, words have been very important to me. I managed to write a couple of novels in the 90s and get into Elle magazine and stuff like that. And so words have remained important to me, although the visual is the most important. And I think Twitter has enabled me to throw in the kind of commentary, the kind of words that I have not felt that Instagram was right for. It just feels right, I suppose, even though there's far less interaction.
Why photos matter? It's something that you write about on your Twitter feed. They still do, don't they? For me, they have a shelf life, which a mere 15-second story on social doesn't, whether you dislike or like Instagram. But stories and reels and so on and so forth have become a currency of storytelling. But still, and I find it very difficult to put my finger on it, and I'm hoping that you're going to come up with something extremely pithy and very strong for me as my final question, really, and why they matter so much.
Do you mean printed photographs or digital printed?
Well, actually, either. Do you know what? Either, because it's a still image. One's more tangible for sure, but they are still a still interpretation of a moment. Take going back to that phenomenally potent picture of your father.
I think for me, the reason that photographs matter and the power involved in them is that there is the implied photographer. So, for example, if you actually do see that photograph of my father traipsing out into the hallways, and it's surreptitiously taken by myself with an iPhone, you can see that although the viewer, the gaze is on my father, and you might have a sense of empathy, a man that's lost his wife, a man that's obviously lost weight, that is, the first word that comes to my mind is disheveled. Although he's a gentleman, he's a gentleman who has become sort of disheveled in his way, but the actual gaze, the view, I am implicit, I am part of that. And I think when we take photographs, even if we're not cognizant of it at the time that we're taking the photograph, when we see a picture, our own presence in that photograph is incredibly powerful. And I think that's what touches me so much about the story of the photograph that my father took of his family, that my father will have been smiling and jiving us along, and that is the photograph by his bedside 40 odd years later when he dies. And he wouldn't have known that, but if you'd showed it to him, he would be able to see both his youth. It's like we are involved in that whole process as photographers, and as onlookers, of course, it has, it has the importance how we looked, how we were, how things were, memories, etc., takes us back. But I think for me, when I say photography is incredibly important, I think it's incredibly important for us, for photographers, because it is our way of talking, discussing, interrogating, working with the external world around us. And it is a construction. A photograph is just a brief moment. It is a reality effect. It's not reality itself. And therefore, just like books, it's open to interpretation. So in the same way that we read a story and we dream away and imagine ourselves as the Harry Potter or, whoever, as we exist in a story, when we see a picture, we dream ourselves into an existence too. That's why I think they're so important.
My thanks to Jon Buscall. And if you would like to be an Extra Miler, which is our Patreon, then you can do so by going to the Support the Show icon on the front of the website, photowalk.show. It's a bit strange, this. Pups has been a bit spooked over the last 5 minutes or so. He keeps looking, do you remember when we turned left just a little while ago, just before starting to listen to John, and I said, it's great, isn't it, when you're walking in the countryside and you turn left or right and you never quite know where you're going to go. Or let's make I've got another misty picture here, hold on. I'm not quite sure these are going to be the misty pictures of the year. I'm really not. Especially when I look at some of the pictures of our esteemed members of the community we have here. 125th, 3.2, here we go. Another sketchbook image. Actually, Eric with a K earlier on, who we mentioned, has a lot of very good misty pictures. Eric, you're going to look at these and think that's not mist. I'll show you mist. Yeah, sorry. So before I completely lose my thread, he keeps looking back towards where we emerged, sort of a dark part of the woods we came out of just a moment ago along this path. And he keeps looking there. He's started getting some sort of pointer tendencies where his left paw, it's always his left paw comes up, prepared, pointing. Not quite sure what he's pointing toward, but he's doing it again. Hold on, let me get he's gonna get a photograph. Paw's gone down, he's walked on. Well done, pups. Usually you stay in that pose for a while. Did you know you were having a photograph taken? Anyway, Jon Buscall, yes, for links to John and other photographers that you've heard from or about today, and there's been a few, their Instagrams, their websites, their Veros, since we're starting to point toward Vero addresses too, that we've mentioned. Go to today's show page, which is episode 342 on photowalk.show, or follow the link in the podcast player app that will also take you there. What are you looking at, pup? Stop it. You're spooking me now. We're in the woods. Stop doing that. Honestly. Push these aside. There we go. Oh, thank you. Who put that hole there? I'll talk about this week's Extra Mile edition in a moment, which airs on Sunday, not Saturday. See, I remembered this week, Sunday. What we'll be talking about. Lindsay Billing next week is my guest, who is an investigative journalist. And she is a photographer as well, in a country where journalism does not come with an easy ticket, particularly if you're asking the kinds of questions, making the kinds of photographs, where those in charge would rather not have the questions asked or the pictures made. Lindsay Billing is... spends most of her time in Afghanistan, and she has some fascinating stories about life in that country. Our playout song today comes from Faith Richards in a moment, but our PS, our postscript, is rather different this week and comes from my first guest that you heard from, Imran Nuri, who has learned a thing or two, as you know now, asking 1,000 strangers for advice across 48 states in 84 days. That's an incredible adventure that he had. And so I asked him, after we'd stopped talking on the, or stopped recording the interview as such, if he wouldn't mind making this week's postscript for the show. I asked him if he would share one of his life lessons, what he's learned through his photographic experience. And this is what he shared.
It's easy to look at people who have accomplished a lot in their lives and who have really seemed to figure it out. And it's really important to remember that nobody has it figured out. Not one single person who I met from over 1,000 people had their whole life figured out. Nobody knows what they're doing. And you can either take that as something that's really scary, or you can take it as the most inspiring and freeing thing to go do whatever you want right now.
It's a little bit crazy. You're suddenly blurry now. I wonder if anything was real. All our history's hazy, like driving in the pouring rain. Are we in too deep to heal? That you're sorry, we'll make up tomorrow. Tell me everything you know I wanna hear. I'm trying to be open, but that window is closing. And either way, I need to make it clear before we're leaving here. You're sorry, we'll make up tomorrow. Tell me everything you know I wanna hear. I'm trying to be open, but that window is closing. And either way, I need to make it clear before we're leaving here.
From Faith Richards to close the show today. And that's it for this week. My thanks to Jon Buscall and Imran Nuri and Roger Gassman, Henrik Saxgren, the thoughts of Neil Gaiman, and of course Joel Meyerowitz, plus mpb.com and those who are extra milers or patrons, which you can join through the link on the website photowalk.show. On Sunday, the Extra Mile edition features The Photographic Mind and the Bank of Nostalgia. David Bowie Scared My Dog, Unthoughtful Thoughts and Dealing with Them, and also the Gratitude Project, how it's been going. Links and further research to what you've heard will be on the show page today, and you'll find a handy link in your podcast player app to go there. Music is from the wonderful artlist.io, and my thanks to Neil Ford for understanding how things work under the hood technically, Emily Renier for your eyes in our Facebook group, and Andrea Gilpin for making sure Instagram and Vero is engaging. I look forward to photographing with you, hearing from you and talking with you next time.
The Photo Walk is a Loading Zone production.